And what I'm going to be trying to do here is kind of, we can see the end state and try and take you on a bit of a journey of how we can potentially get there. And part of that is linked to what is the subject here about the attack surface challenge and how Microsoft security layers into all of that. So the approach is, first of all, a hello from me. So why are you listening to me? Well, the answer is I'm product director here at Cocho. In terms of my career, I'm old enough to remember the days of the internet arriving into the enterprise. So when I started in IT, I had hair and I wasn't grey. So it's quite a while ago, but there are some interesting parallels that I'll touch on as I go through some of the journey here with how the internet came along and disrupted and how Gen AI is starting to follow some of the same trends there. I worked for one of the biggest banks in the world, HSBC. Grew my IT career there from being a trainee programmer working on the year 2000 bug, to give you a kind of time frame. And that went all the way through to, I was responsible for their entire mobile fleet of about 70,000 handsets in 85 countries. I then shifted across to the other side of the table and joined a company called Moblicity, where I was the CTO over there. And through the acquisition of Moblicity into Cocho, I've joined the wonderful family of Cocho, and I'm now the product director here. So I'm responsible for our product strategy, how we take our solutions in the Microsoft stack and bring that to market for our clients. So I'm going to bring back those of you who've seen me present before. There's the return of an old friend. Only briefly, you'll be pleased to hear. For those of you who haven't seen it before, hopefully it'll set the scene and give you a bit of context to what I think is going on out there. How actually we need to go through a step of simplification on the security stack. This is definitely one of the big trends that I've picked up on this year about how actually we've got to start bringing things together in order to actually try and keep on top of the sheer workload that's coming in the security space. Quick summary, Q&A at the end, so please do ask questions as we're going along on Slido. That will definitely, we'll have a little bit of time at the end to touch on that. So, the return of an old friend. Anyone who has seen me present will have seen this before. This is the concept of your data has left the building. So this is the world I came into when I joined as a trainee programmer before the year 2000. Everything was basically a private network. Data was stored on big ugly mainframes all the way through to the first Novell NetWare servers and the first NT servers, in fact. So that's kind of the world I came from. And the world of the internet came along and it was completely air-gapped. I am old enough to remember that if you wanted to use the internet, you had to literally queue up to use a dial-up PC in one of the biggest companies in the world. That's how disruptive the internet was in the end, because there was actually quite a long queue to use that one PC to do not even a Google search, to ask Jeeves or something like that, to actually try and get some information. Now that was incredibly disruptive almost straight away. It changed the concept of knowledge in IT. So I was a programmer. Programming was basically a skill that you built up over time by going on training courses or reading books or knowing who to phone up or walk over to actually get the answer to a question, or you just worked it out on your own. The idea that this thing came along that would actually, you could start to get the answer quicker was a fascinating one. And for some, this was a real threat to their way of looking at the world. They were the knowledge holders. They were the gatekeepers of knowledge. And obviously, as a disruptive young IT scally, I was able to go and basically search the answer and get on with it much quicker. That's the world that I came into. Now, that bridge between the internet and the private network clearly had to be filled with security stack that built up over time in that DMZ space. This is where security, network security, really built up. The idea of, you've got to actually start to monitor. What are people doing in terms of what are they doing on the internet? We've got to keep a track of that. Is now becoming something, what are people doing on Gen AI? Is it shadow Gen AI? Have we actually got an approved way of doing this? Is this actually, a very relevant conversation as well? How do we actually get back in? So this is where, RSA tokens, everyone remember those. So this is where, from the mobile side, the first device management plane started to exist that wasn't the traditional private network, the MDM world. This is where we connected up the email world, and indeed how we created the first VPNs for devices that would be on the perimeter. Now, people spent a lot of money protecting that world, and then mobile came along and completely cocked the whole thing up because they just lived on the internet by default. They were the first devices to do so. And as a result, they were really disruptive and really hard to get working. And then along came cloud services. And obviously, Office 365 was one of the killer use cases for the cloud. And the point we make in this presentation, which is some years old now, I think it dates back some 7, 8 years, we made the point, your data's all over the place now. Now, that is, in some ways, the attack surface challenge starting to manifest itself. These endpoints just worked in a world that wasn't as relevant to your on-premise data. And then, to give you an idea of how old this slide is, Windows 10 is coming. So for the first time, we were talking about the fact that this idea that Windows is just going to become an internet-connected endpoint and is just going to work like a mobile will, that was quite revolutionary. And now think where we are today. And the point we made with this presentation was all of that stuff you put on the edge of your network, the functions they undertook need to continue to exist in the modern world as well. You still need to keep track of what people are doing, web security. You still need to be able to log people in securely and to actually stay on top of security on an ongoing basis. You still need to manage devices effectively, all devices. And email is kind of a given now, as is the concept of VPN. Now, where these slides kind of end is the point, the last time I ran these there was this new buzzword about the service edge. SSE became this buzzword that everyone was like, what the hell is SSE? And the truth is, basically, it's some of these things all packaged together. So you talk about the endpoint, you talk about what's that endpoint doing, what can it connect to, how do I keep it secure on an ongoing basis? That was the world that was, and that's the journey we've been on for a number of years. Now, as we kind of fast forward to today, that's actually this slide. We're now in a position where we're thinking much, much more about data, endpoints, identities. Actually, how do we deal with cloud applications, various cloud applications, and the workloads associated with that, and still keep all of our network security together? This is a complete transformation of how we work. We've basically got all of these various components, and they're all over the place. We've got an interconnectedness of pieces that is particularly hard to stay on top of. And that in itself has now created this attack surface challenge. Every single space in this hybrid world is now effectively a challenge for us to try and stay on top of. This is the hybrid attack surface. And the slides kind of paint a picture. They give you an idea of the journey we've been on. And this isn't news. I'm sure you'll have seen versions of these slides over the years. But the point is here, the challenges are growing. The sheer level of attacks is growing. The sophistication of the attacks is growing. You can't just continue as you did before. You've got to do something about this if you're going to try and stay on top of it. And fundamentally, the only way you can try and stay on top of this in terms of technology stack is to simplify. When I put that slide up before with the firewall and the DMZ, what most organizations would do is create their own unique recipe of different security providers and firewalls, etc., in order to create their flavor of security. The truth is, the more you do that, the more your security becomes unique to you, and the harder it is to manage when someone new needs to come in and actually build up their capabilities in your environment in order for you to grow your security function. One of the big shifts, really big shifts in the last 12 months since we ran Summit is in the Entra space. So Microsoft are now coming for the service edge, this zero trust network access space. This is a massive statement from Microsoft in terms of what they want to do in terms of helping us stay more secure on an ongoing basis. They are absolutely looking at what's the biggest blind spot for us staying secure on an ongoing basis. And the answer is the broader network security space. The service edge piece is how we're going to deliver that on an ongoing basis going forwards. And what it's doing, I talked in the past about there's a tipping point between your on-prem or your cloud-first model. Where is the tipping point? The point now is if you've still got that hybrid of a bit of on-prem and a bit in the data center, a bit in the cloud, you're now at the point where the tipping point is effectively cloud-first for pretty much every organization. And there's no real reason to think on-prem first, cloud second. It's got to be cloud first. So I kind of make the point, it's not that simple. But if you protect your users, and if you protect the endpoints, the traffic, and the data that they're generating, then it kind of is. And this is the beauty of the Microsoft stack starting to come together. So Entra is kind of the foundation of it all. So Richard kind of mentioned about how Entra is one of those cornerstones. If you're going to think about how do you stay on top of things on an ongoing basis at a transaction level going forwards, the identity is at the heart of it. It's the big padlock on the front door to everything, and it remains the way that you always verify on an ongoing basis going forwards. But there's just, when we talk about Entra, I think there is this perception that it is the world of what was Azure AD is now Entra ID. Entra is way, way more. It's effectively an entire range of capabilities now. One of the key things that's in that world of Entra is identity governance. And this is absolutely key. Not only do you need to control identity, but you need to actually make sure that each person in the organization can only access the data they are supposed to on an ongoing basis, and to make sure that when they leave the organization, their access is revoked. This is one of the #1 ways that an attack will happen in your organization is someone has been compromised, their account is compromised, the user is overprivileged. They've got access to far too much stuff, and that could just be, creep over years, or just the fact that no one's really worked on this space over time. And also, quite often, it could be an attack on an account they actually left ages ago. It's just a stale account. Governance is the way to keep on top of that on an ongoing basis. And now, if you think about that as that's your Entra hygiene, that's your base foundation layer, you start to layer on the rest. So if all endpoints are cloud native, which they effectively are now, they can now be managed, monitored, and kept secure on an ongoing basis. They're built to live on the internet. They live there all the time. This is where not just Intune, everyone's comfortable with the concept of Intune now, but Intune Suite is an amazing combination of technologies that is basically everything you need to manage an endpoint on an ongoing basis. And it doesn't matter what that endpoint is. Clearly, Windows 11 is a great opportunity for you to build your baseline on that stack. If you haven't done so already, but if you're looking at Mac, the world of Mac, bring that in. Your mobile estate, probably running on Intune already. We help a lot of organizations with delivering that. Then wrap security around your data. Richard again touched on this. Purview and Priva as well, they're fundamentally the way you will make sure that access, even in the event of a breach, is only to data that user was allowed to see in the first place. So you've already massively controlled the blast zone. But also, you would stop, even if the account was breached, your policies may well stop any exfiltration in the first place. And this world of zero trust networking, even for your on-premise data, just to be really clear, so when I say the old stuff, all of your systems and data can now be managed really effectively, and we touch on this in some of the later sessions, around how, conditional access on steroids, basically. How do you actually now do conditional access on everything? Think about that. So Entra Internet and private access, really powerful platforms that clearly they're just arriving, but they are massively disruptive already. One of the most popular webinars we've ever run was just talking about where Entra Internet access and Entra private access are up to. And they're only just going GA, hopefully very soon. It's clearly something that everybody's keeping an eye on. So on top of all of that, this is where you really get into the security stack, the traditional security stack. So you've got Defender XDR, Defender for Cloud. This is where you can really start to power through in terms of getting telemetry back in so you can take action on top of it from all of these various technology platforms we've just talked about. And then actually to put something that is a single master source of truth data set across all of this, so you can start to do SIEM, SOAR capabilities, and you can really start to have true visibility of what's going on where appropriate. And it's one of the key things when we have a conversation about this is where appropriate, bring data into Sentinel. If you're just logging for the sake of logging, which we do see, it's very expensive, but does it make you more secure? And that then means you get full visibility. And once you've got visibility of what's going on in your world, then you can actually start to act. And not just act as a person, as a security person, but also start to do orchestration, automation. You can now actually start to automatically disable accounts, nuke machines, whatever it may be, when certain conditions apply. And clearly, as Richard mentioned, if you do that and you're on the Microsoft stack and you've actually started to build all of these various foundation stones together, now you can bring Copilot for Security into the mix. And this is really powerful, capable technology that will allow you to speed up the response. So security analysts are a massive, that to try and keep on top of the growth of security threat, to try and recruit enough security analysts is one of the #1 global challenges we see across all markets. The only way you can keep up is to simplify the stack and then work out how you can respond quicker or scale faster. This is a genuine hyperscaler moment in terms of the ability for an individual to start to do more than they did before. To go kind of bring it back full circle a little bit, that's exactly what internet and search did for the first time when it first arrived into the enterprise 20-something years ago. And that was a generational shift in some ways, but it was an enormously more productive moment. Suddenly, as a programmer, I was way more productive than I was before. Now, all of that is effectively how Microsoft is starting to simplify the world. So your traditional world of offices, and let's say you've got O365, M365, etc., in your estate now, that's kind of your baseline layer. The point we make here is you've now got a complete suite of security solutions that layer on top of it. And this Microsoft first approach means that you've effectively got a complete, fully encompassing security stack out of one single vendor. And this is enormously powerful going forwards. And the key thing here as well is if for resiliency reasons, redundancy reasons, you have a multi-cloud strategy, whether that's other SaaS platforms or indeed other infrastructure as a service providers, platform as a service providers, Microsoft has got tools in its armory to actually allow you to maintain and keep control of a multi-cloud environment as well. Have a single policy that applies all of your infrastructure as a service platforms. Really powerful capabilities. Because ultimately, all your endpoints are now just internet devices. Your offices are effectively a coffee shop. You've just got the ability to provide a bit of wireless, people drop in and start working. Now that may sound fanciful, but we do have customers who are already here. They've literally jumped from WAN to internet, full stop. A lot of conversations sometimes are about, can we do SD-WAN? How can we actually create this virtual overlay on the internet? Well, the answer for them is, didn't need to. We just skipped to the end. We've got this ability to actually have a zero trust network model now, so we'll just go straight to it. It's available now, it's capable now, definitely something to consider. So, I do genuinely believe that Microsoft really is now the foundation of a modern security stack. It is, without doubt, a fully capable suite of technologies. Now, clearly, a lot of what we talk about here is where you start. You start with, you've bought your E3 or E5. A lot of organizations are still trying to get value from what they've already got. Absolutely vital that you do so, and it's a great way to start the journey of simplification. Not that long ago, you would have a third-party antivirus and you would have various security solutions layered around the endpoint. You don't really need to do that anymore in a lot of cases. You've got the capability in Defender to do that straight onto the endpoint from the Microsoft stack, and it's there out of the box. You can then start to layer on all of these additional security products and services in the Microsoft stack. Some of these clearly aren't in your E3 or E5, and that may be a conversation to have around licensing. But remember, everything that we're talking about here is something that you're already spending money on elsewhere. And logically, over time, by going down to a single vendor stack, you're going to spend less time managing all of this stuff if you actually start to think about consolidation in this space. Because I genuinely believe simplifying the technology stack is the only way you're going to stay on top of this going forwards. Because it's easier to manage. And the tools that Microsoft builds in order for you to scale faster in terms of security attack or whatever it may be, the concept of Copilot works so wonderfully when you're Microsoft first on your technology stack in the first place. We've had, if we think about Copilot for M365 for a minute, got customers who have basically not been able to jump like the board would want to. The board is saying, we need to do something on we need to do something with this AI piece. Copilot, we've got these licenses, what are we doing with them? And the answer is, we haven't got any data in the Microsoft cloud yet. So turning it on is irrelevant. It can't see anything. The same is true on the security stack. Out of the box, it's just going to work better on Microsoft. Now, that's not to say you can't make it work with everything else, and indeed we're doing work with customers to do the integration space. But out of the box capabilities are going to be that much more powerful. And I use a pandemic analogy here. There is a growing sense of wanting to get into the herd. Now, this is a really interesting conversation I'm having with a lot of CISOs at the moment about we don't want our security to look like everybody else's. And I think that comes from the mindset of we build our own secret recipe of security that makes us unique, and therefore attackers can't attack us in the same way as everybody else. But the truth is that actually you're better off working on the other way around. If my security looks like everybody else's because it's built on the same basic tenets of Microsoft First, all the various stack, then not only does that mean you can get response quicker, we can come in and help you faster or whatever it may be, but there is this sense that you can apply learning faster because your scenario is the same as someone else's. And we're seeing this already in security operations. We can apply the learnings from one customer straight into another because their environments are fundamentally built on the same stuff. It's able to literally port across the learning in one step.